God is not silent. If you're not hearing him, the issue is not access. It's either a lack of attention, a lack of formation, or a lack of obedience. This season of Coffee with Phil is going to confront the quiet crisis in the church. And by church, I don't mean the building, and I don't mean the organisation. I mean the people. Well, welcome to this season of Coffee with Phil. I am excited to speak about the eyes of the seer, the ears of those that were learning to see, hear, and respond to God in everyday life. Look, this is about re-normalising hearing God as foundational Christian maturity. It's not about elitism, it's about maturity, and it's about activating you, listeners, into confidence, into discernment, and your choice to respond in obedience. By the end of this season, you won't just believe God speaks. You'll expect him to in every circumstance, every day. You're going to recognize his voice more clearly and choose to respond. Let's get into it. Well, good afternoon and welcome to my studio. Welcome to Coffee with Phil. Welcome to episode 154. And we are deep into a series called Eyes of the Seer. And I want to unpack again just why I feel this is so pivotal in this time, and really why I'm calling you as a listener, frequent friend of Phil, why I'm calling you into that place of deeper seeking. And I want to get into that because that's really my driver, my theme for today. But before I do, I just want to geek out on some coffee. Coffee with Phil. Coffee's a passion of mine. It's a hobby. It's something that I tutu with on the side, and I like to share it with you. I'm assuming you like me to share it with you, but if you don't, you can, I suppose, skip to the next part. Anyway, I just bought a whole bunch of new green beans, and for a long time I've just been buying the same beans. I've got a roaster at home here that's digital. I have a profile, which is profile is essentially the formula of how the coffee gets roasted by the computer. It's not me. I used to stir the beans manually, and that wasn't very effective. And then I used to roast them over an open flame, and that was just quite simply dangerous. So now I have a computer-driven roaster, and the profile is designed by someone that's far more clever than me, specifically for the purpose that I have. And so I go on the website and I download the profile, and I roast those beans. Well, the green bean coffee supplier that I'm using out of Christchurch in New Zealand here, they're a bulk importer. They package them up into small bags for people like me, so I don't have to buy 100 kilos at a time. They just had a special on some specialty beans that were of a fruity variety, and I got to say I was a bit tempted, so I bought a couple of small bags of just a kilo of each of these beans. One of them is from Java in the south of Indonesia. Java is where where Bali is, if I just say that general area, you know where I'm talking about. And the other one was from Colombia. And these are quite fruity. And so I wanted them for a light roast for a pour over. And so I took the beans away with me on the weekend, but I had downloaded a specific roast profile from a website that was based on the altitude that the beans were grown at. So these beans were grown at about 17 or 1800 meters of altitude, which affects the makeup of the bean and the flavors that are found in the bean. And so you roast the bean differently. So I downloaded this profile, especially for filter coffee, for pour over, for drip. And so I roasted them and I took them away on the weekend, and you grind them quite coarsely. So if you want to think like a coarse ground salt, you want them so the water's going to pass through. This is not espresso that works from steam. Sorry, I'm really geeking out here. And so anyway, I ground these beans and I put them into a drip. And I also put them into a cold brew overnight. Oh my gosh, they're just absolutely gorgeous. There's a real. Kathy said they smelled a little bit too flowery for her liking. Not that she was drinking it, but it just filled the house with this aroma of these coffee beans, and I'm just absolutely loving it. And so I haven't tried the other ones yet. So I've got more to talk about when it comes to coffee, but I just want to say Coffee with Phil is an adventure at my house. And it's Monday here in my world, so early this morning I'm up with roasting beans to set the week up for success. And that's just, I suppose, my world outside of the podcast. Anyway, let's get into episode 154. And I've titled this episode, this is the 7th episode in the series. I think we're going to land this pretty soon, maybe a couple more. The Eyes of the Seer. And this series has been driven by my desire that we would come into a place, each one of us, that we would develop the eyes of a seer. So, in the Old Testament of the Bible, the first part, before Jesus, there was a specific mantle that was given to people who were like the prophets, and they were called seers, and they would perceive what God was saying and doing. They would see into the moves of the angelic realm and the kingdom of heaven, and they would not so much predict the future, but they would call people into what God was doing. Sometimes that was around judgment, if judgment was necessary for a nation, and sometimes it was around a fulfillment of the promises of God, because God always chooses to partner with people in his promises. And so this was quite a unique place in the Old Testament in that it wasn't common for everybody just to hang in that space. But thank you, Jesus. Now that he's opened the veil up and we can come into that place, we each should have a desire to pursue the things of heaven, to partner with the heavenly realm, to participate in the promises of God, and I suppose draw others into that place. It's really my theme for today's episode, is that your obedience will draw others into participating in what God is doing. And that's the mandate that I have for you, dear listener. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 14, I desire that all would prophesy. It's a very loose way to describe what I'm really exhorting and calling you into. But why is it important? Why is it important that we each, not just Phil, not just the bishop over there, not just the person that's leading the church down here, why each one of us should develop the eyes of a seer? I'm going to tell you in a minute. But before I do, I was just reminded, there was a season of our lives, we were in a home group with several other couples. Kathy and I were newly married, young marrieds. Let's just say we were a lot younger than we are now. It's 20 plus years ago. And we're in this home group where we really, each one of us wanted to grow in the ability to hear God's voice, to see what he was doing, and to build up others in the ways of God. So when we got together in this home group, we would go after it. We'd absolutely go after it. We would pray for it. We would test ourselves. We would study. We would learn. In those days, it was about DVDs. So we'd get some DVD teaching, and we'd watch it together, and we'd challenge each other, and we'd lay hands on each other and pray for each other, and begin to immerse ourselves in the things of God, that he would grow us into someone that could be used by him. That was exciting, and that's really, I suppose, what I'm exhorting you into here in this episode 154 that I've called Pursuit of Encounter. So let me answer that question. I promise I would. Why is it important that we each, not one, each one of us develop eyes of a seer? One, it's really useful for personal guidance. There's far too many confused Christians around right now. And if you go back to the previous episodes, where I've been calling us out of my personal journey into a place, myself included, of, how would I pray if I would see what Jesus sees? Personal guidance is a huge one that we can each be benefited of if we develop the eyes of a seer, if we allow Jesus to come into that place where God builds us. Secondly, it's a maturity to lead others. And that's really the theme for today. But ultimately, friends, totally different subject, not for today, but intimacy. Oh my gosh, I'm on a bit of a journey around studying that. You're no doubt going to experience some of that later as I share it with you, but a deeper connection with Jesus. I just have this beautiful image going on in my quiet times now as I pray before I fall to sleep. I don't know if you've ever had someone kiss you on the neck. And by that I don't mean passionate kind of weird stuff. What I mean by that is a physical demonstration of devotion that is kind of not common. But I have this picture of Jesus embracing me and kissing me on the side of my neck. And it's a beautiful and a powerful picture for me at the moment of just how near he is and how much he desires me. And that's going to lead us to a conversation about intimacy in another podcast episode, I'm sure. But ultimately, when I can see Jesus more clearly, I come to know him more nearly and more dearly. And so the best outcome any one of us could ever have as part of this faith walk is a deeper intimacy with Jesus. I don't know if those motivate you, those three things: personal guidance, maturity to lead others, deeper connection with Jesus. I pray that you hunger after that. So let me get into a bit of content. Here we are. And I want to refer you to, where's the Bible? Here's the Bible. What does the Bible say about this? I want to go to a well-known, common encounter, place of encounter, in Isaiah chapter 6. I mentioned this in passing recently. If you want to grow in your hunger to pursue an encounter with God, Isaiah 6 is good reading. So let's go there today. The Bible says, "In the year King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord seating upon a throne." I saw the Lord seating upon a throne. There you go, the eyes of a seer. "High and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. And above him stood the seraphim. Each had 6 wings, and 2 he covered with his face, and 2 he covered with his feet, and with 2 he flew. And he called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the foundations of the thresholds of the house I was in shook at the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke. And I said, Woe is me! For I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." You getting the idea here? There's an encounter that happens when we have eyes of a seer. "Then one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a burning coal that he had taken with tongs from the altar." This is the altar of the presence of the Lord that burns continuously before his throne. "And he touched my mouth with coal and said, Behold, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for." Look, I could stop there, and we could just be mesmerized by the beauty and the wonder of what it would be to be in that place that Isaiah is attempting to describe. If you're driving, don't close your eyes, but if you're not driving, maybe close your eyes and just try and imagine what it would be like to see the Lord seating on his throne, the train of his robe filling the temple, the glory cloud and the smoke and the seraphim that are beyond description, and to be shaken in that place of encounter. I mean, I try and get myself there with my imagination, and it's difficult. And I'm not trying to conjure anything up. I'm trying to do the very best that I can to come into a place where the Lord opens the eyes of my heart so that I can see in Revelation what he has prepared for me. But it doesn't stop there, friends, because those people that chase encounter and do nothing with encounter are just junkies looking for their next fix. And I want to say there's something beyond the encounter, but we have to be people who pursue the encounter. What happens next? Isaiah chapter 6, verse 8. "And Isaiah says, I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? Then I said, Here I am, send me." And he said, go and say to this people, and I'll get to that in a second because I haven't finished with the Bible yet. But I just want to say, here's my encouragement for you out of the Bible, then I want to tell you a couple of stories. Isaiah shows us that the Lord will reveal himself. The Lord will reveal himself. If you're sitting on your tractor, if you're driving in your car, if you're walking your dog, if you're doing your dishes, if you're making a cup of tea, if you're supposed to be sleeping, whatever's going on, you have to turn your eyes, incline your heart, and the Lord will reveal himself. He's faithful. He's absolutely faithful. And I'll show that to you in a minute. Secondly, an encounter will lead you, a true encounter, not just a buzzy feeling because the song's doing well or the band's at church is great or something happened. You got a car park right outside the warehouse. No. An encounter will lead you to a place of wonder, which is kind of like a feeling of awe. Awe and wonder, they go together. But also the fear of the Lord. Woe is me, Isaiah said, for I am aware of who I am in comparison to the glory and the wonder of who God is. Now, God doesn't mind us getting to that place as long as we're not coming into self-judgment and self-condemnation. It's just an awareness of without him, we're nothing. And you'll see very, very quickly in this passage, go and read it for yourself, friends, but you'll notice the seraphim took the coal from the presence of the Lord and touched his lips. His covering, his atonement, that's what atonement means, covering. His covering makes us pure. You don't have to do it. You don't have to earn your way into being ready before God. An encounter creates it for you because of the finished work of Jesus, which is not the case here with Isaiah, but we now have access through the finished work of the cross to the place of atonement because Christ's sacrifice covers us. Now, Isaiah didn't have that. So a seraphim takes a coal and touches his lips and says, hey, behold, this has touched your lips, your guilt is taken away and your sin atoned for. Ooh, but listen to this. Listen, lean in. Purity leads to commissioning. Ooh, come on. That's worth the price of admission right there. You can stop and you've got your money's worth. Purity leads to commissioning. An encounter, we must pursue encounter, but encounter must not be the end of the journey. We must understand that because of who he is, we can come into a revelation of who we are, but also why we are. Encounter leads to purity that leads to commissioning. Now, a little side note here, I am not going to dive down this rabbit hole, but as I was studying this passage and preparing my heart for you to bring to you, I noticed that in verse 10, the Lord says to go to the people, he says, say this, make the heart of the people dull, their ears heavy, their blind eyes, and they will not see, and they will not hear, and they will not understand with their hearts. If you're going to be someone that pursues encounter, you have to accept that not everyone's going to get the memo. Oh my gosh, I'm not going to dive down that rabbit hole. Okay, so let's move on because I've got to divert myself off that. Let's move to the next section. I've got on my notes here. I want you to keep in mind the title of this episode, which is Pursuit of Encounter. And then I want to say this to you. To remember encounter, you first have to have one. And I think too many people in the church are cruising along, riding on other people's coattails, listening to stories of really good preachers that can tell good stories, but they haven't had an experience of themselves. So you're living off other people's experiences. To remember an encounter, like Isaiah has had here, you should have one of your own. I had a season where this would happen to me almost every night, certainly many times a week. It was when we were living in Boise, Idaho, and the Lord would lead me into a deep place of encounter with him and actually get me to get out of bed. And I'm like, oh, Lord, again? He goes, well, yeah. And I'm like, oh, hang on, I don't want to miss this. And there was one night I wanted to share the story here now. There was one of these where I got up and I was, like in this air-conditioned apartment. I'm in my boxer shorts. It's pitch black. Everyone's asleep. I'm sure everyone in the building was asleep, but everyone in our apartment was asleep. And I go up into the living room and I'm like, Lord, what am I doing here? And he says, I'm giving you a sword. I was like, hey? He says, hold out your hands. And I held up my hands before me, and my arms, like outstretched. He says, I'm placing in your hands a sword. I'm like, what's the sword for? And he goes, well, what do you use a sword for? I was like, well, swords for warfare. He goes, yep. And he says, I want you to put it in the scabbard that's on your back. I was like, I beg your pardon? And he's like, put it on your back. Hold it so that you've got it. Carry it with you. And so I had to enact. It was like this prophetic enactment where I took the sword that was in my hands. I couldn't see it, but I just had to be obedient to what I sensed the Lord revealing. And he said, I want you to lift it up over your left shoulder. I want you to slide it into that scabbard that's strapped to your back. And I said, Lord, what is this for? He says, I am preparing you for the way that you shall go. And that was a deep encounter. It was. I didn't have the glory cloud. I didn't have the smoke. I didn't have the seraphim, but I had this wonderment, this awe, and the fear of the Lord came upon me in such a powerful way that I was just aware of who I was, insufficient, ill-prepared. I was an alien in a foreign land. I had no job, no purpose, no future that I could see, and yet the Lord was saying, I have a future for you and I can see it, and that's what matters. And that was a very, very powerful thing that like even now I come back to it and I remember it and I'm like, bless the Lord. Thank you, Lord. God, you're so good. That's a personal story that I don't need to tell anyone about. I'm telling you as an example that if you want to remember an encounter, you first have to have one. I can now stand here and I can remember that moment. I can remember how I felt. I remember what I was doing. I remember where I was standing. And I remember, most importantly, how God sees me. I've told you the story about my significant shift in the last maybe 18 months, moving away from leading a local church and being involved actively in church as a ministry. And I had a revelation. I went away to seek God. And in that moment, I knew God was drawing me into something, but I couldn't see what it was drawing me into, but I knew what he was drawing me out of, if that makes sense. And I had to have a revelation where I would say, Lord, the answer is yes. I don't even know what the question is. But then God tests that. And he comes and he says, well, you're done. And I'm like, whoa, what? No way, I'm busy. I've got a vision. I've got people. I love these people. And I love what I do. And he goes, no, you're done. And sorry about that. I was actually going to edit that out. That's just a neighbour arriving home from work. But my world, your world. Look, the point is I had this revelation and I had to choose to sacrifice comfort for calling, because an encounter will lead to a commissioning. And I was at one of those moments where I said to Kathy, I can't not say yes. I'm so absolutely certain that God is doing something in me to prepare to do something out of me that I have to say yes. And that's that idea that we pursue encounter, and it should freak you out. It should make you really doubt whether you want it, and it should compel you to pursue him. Because remember, the greatest goal you could ever have in an encounter is a deeper connection with Jesus. All right, I want to say this to you because I'm looking at the time and I'm thinking I've got a lot left on the notes in front of me before I get to the finish. Seeing God always leads to bearing witness. Let me say that to you again. Seeing what God has for you will always lead to bearing witness. And it looks in like a bunch of different things. So in Isaiah chapter 6, I saw the Lord seated upon the throne, Isaiah says, and it led to a commissioning. Whom shall I send and who will go for us? And I said, here I am, Lord, send me. He was called to be a witness to the things of God, and it didn't go well for the people of God, to be honest with you. But you can read that in Isaiah chapter 6. What about Saul? I've talked about Saul in Acts chapter 9, where he's off to Damascus to destroy Christians. And Jesus comes and knocks him off his donkey. And he has an encounter with Jesus because he has a vision. And in this, like when God's talking to Ananias, he says, I'm going to show him how much he must suffer for the sake of my name. The encounter to see Jesus led Saul to a place to become Paul because there was a commissioning that he would bear witness to the Gentiles of the gospel message of Jesus. What about Peter? Like even in the next page, turn the page. Acts chapter 10. Peter has a vision. He's up on the roof. He has a vision and he's got to go and see Cornelius. Seeing the Lord always calls to bear witness. What about Judges chapter 6? I was just thinking about this afternoon, and Gideon gets to this place where he gets visited by an angel of the Lord, and he sees the angel. He perceives it was an angel of the Lord. It says in Gideon 6 verse 22. And he says, "Alas, I've seen an angel." He thinks he's going to die. And the Lord says, "Peace be with you. Do not fear, you shall not die." Gideon built an altar there to the Lord, and he called it Yahweh Shalom, for the Lord is peace. What's my point? Gideon having an encounter, pursuing. God just turns up because he knew the pursuit of Gideon's heart was for the things of God. You got to understand, it's a discipline that's in someone. And I want to say this to you. What you read in the Bible is a single verse that reveals common practice. I need you to understand that. God doesn't do random. He doesn't do one-offs. He's a God of discipline. He's a God of pattern. He's a God that's very regimented because his way is the best way. And all through the Bible, you can read these verses that reveal to us that when we lift up our eyes to see God, he will reveal to us. But it's only because we've got a heart that's turned towards him and a discipline to pursue him. And it's the only reason, I believe it's the only reason Gideon was used, is because his disposition of his heart was turned toward the things of God, and God said, "Here's a man I can use because his heart is for me to turn the people away from the worship of Baal." Man. Whew. What about Genesis chapter 18? Look, I'm going to put these references in the notes. You need to go back and study these. Genesis chapter 18. Abraham, the Lord appears to him and the oaks, and he stood at the door of the tent. It says this, Genesis 18 verse 2. He lifted up his eyes, and behold, come on. What is this telling us? That there was an expectation in the heart of Abraham to bear witness to the things of God, to see the things of God, to understand that he was in fact a friend of God well before Moses was, and that God would reveal himself. These men came, they were messengers of the Lord, and they went on their mission to Sodom. But then, look, in verse 23, Genesis 18 verse 23, then Abraham still stood before the Lord. Then Abraham drew near and said, oh my gosh, come on guys, come on. What you read in the Bible is a single verse, but it reveals common practice. Would you be someone that would pursue encounter? Would you be someone that would stand at the door of your tent in the heat of the day and look up and see the Lord? Would you stand before the Lord and, as it says in verse 23, draw near to him so that you can have an encounter with him? An encounter where the Lord will reveal himself to you, that he can then take you into a place where he would show you and you would see the things that he's prepared in his heart for you, to invite you into what he's doing. I don't have a lot of time to get into this next point, but intercession means to contend for what you have seen. And what I love about this end of Genesis chapter 18, the heading in bold, just keep it simple, read the headlines. Abraham intercedes for Sodom. And he wasn't necessarily, he did contend for the city to be saved, but then he contended for a few. And we know that that's Lot and his family, his household. His wife was saved, and then she chose to look back. The point I'm making is the Lord's going to show you something because he wants you to participate in what he's doing, and that's called intercession. That's called praying. That's contending for what you have seen. And to go back and listen to episode 153 where Jesus said, how would you pray if you would see what I see? That's a challenge for all of us. It's a challenge for me, particularly in the journey that I'm in at the moment, just about, God, what does the rest of this year look like? God, what have you got for us? God, if I know this is what you've said to us about the season we're walking into, what do I have to do to contend for it with my heart? Finally, friends, I want to leave you with this. I want to say to you, allow God to build you. Allow God to build you. Would you take your hands off the steering wheel? Would you stop trying to control the outcomes? And would you allow God to build you? Because frequency leads to familiarity. How often you pursue him, how often you turn your heart towards him, how often you stand at the door of your tent in the heat of the day and lift your eyes to see him. Frequency will lead to familiarity. You'll know the ways of God. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to encounter him. Moving your momentum affects your motivation. Do you know that now these things become second nature to me? Because the Lord has really convicted me in this space that I come to pray and I say, oh, hang on, Lord, before I start praying, how would you pray? So that I can pray what you're praying. The whole thing has shifted my motivation. It's not, how can I pray to get what I want? It's how do I pray to join what Jesus is doing? This leads to clarity. And the good thing is clarity will help us with certainty and confidence. Look, we're emotional beings. We're creatures of confidence. We're insecure in so many ways, and what that means is that we need to be clear on what God's doing, certain of what God's doing, so we have confidence that we step into what he asks us to do. That's going to lead us to a place of commitment, and a place of commitment, if you say yes to God, a place of commitment will lead you to take compelling action. So clarity, certainty, commitment, compelling action. And why is that important? Well, friends, as I close, there are lives out there that will be affected because of your yes. If you choose to pursue encounter so that God can reveal things to you in a way that you receive them in a partnership, an agreement with him, lives will be changed because you said yes. He's calling you into a place of encounter for what's on the other side of encounter. Not just for the glory cloud, but for the lives that are transformed and the kingdom advancing through you and me. Ooh, deep breath. Time to go. Time to go have a cup of tea and lie down, because I feel like that's the end of the day. But may you be challenged by this. I encourage you to listen to this again. There's so much juice in this. You're going to have to listen to it more than once. But pursue him. Pursue him for who he is, and he will reveal great things. God bless you. I've got to go. I'll be back soon. Bye-bye.